Hey everybody, Romi Hill here. Again, I'm the designer behind Designs by Romi, and this is, well, the third, but sort of the fourth live of my Summer of Lace Knit Along 2023 series of YouTube lives that are every Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific time. And that's through July, I think it's July 27th, that might be the 28th, through that 27th or 28th. Which one of those is Thursday? And I am going through all things lace, and I am so happy that you could join me. I see that everybody is a little toasty today. I'm also toasty, so yeah, I hope we can all keep cool. Hi, everybody. It's so nice to see you. Oh, I'm just looking at everybody in the chat. So there is a delay, as always, with live. When I broadcast out, it's delayed from what I'm saying. And then if you ask me a question in the live chat, I will see it. It's just a little bit of a delay because it's a delay for me to get to you, and then you ask the question, and then I look at it, and just a little delay. But I will actually, I promise I'll answer your questions. So please don't be shy because I love to hear them, and I will actually be answering some questions that you all have asked me today. And so, first of all, I had a question about mousse lace, like what we call mousse lace, and that is like super heavyweight lace. Like you can do lace in bulky weight yarn, and it looks pretty cool. So I actually have a couple of samples. So I'm just gonna reach over here. I'm not gonna put this on because it's really hot. So this is my branches scarf, and it's like a zigzag, and you can see it's a lacy scarf. It's basically an edging that I made into a full scarf. And so if you want to start with something like this is a great thing to start with because it's really super easy to see if you're missing a yarn over or having any problem. And you can kind of see up close the directional stitches are like they're really obvious. So it's really simple to see if you go wrong. You can kind of look at it and put your finger on it. So it's making me hot just touching this. And then I have another one to show you. This is pearlless. Oops, I just knocked a bunch of stuff over. This is pearlless, and it's giant. It's just a like a giant, huge warm hug, which you definitely don't need any of today. But it's it's a nice shawl. It's a lot of fun to knit. I actually knit this one in the summer, which is kind of funny, but thankfully I was keeping cool while I was doing it. I did not have it on my lap. Okay, so that was my first question that I had. So let me look for questions over here. So is there any way to tell what weight beads to what weight of yarn, I think was the question. Okay, so I am going to talk about beads today. So I will talk about like the what size of beads to use a little bit later on. The next thing I want to just show you the samples that I'm going to kind of go over today to use as illustrations. This one is a larger size of Little Bit of Love. So it's got a short row top here in garter stitch, and then there's just a plain lace portion, and then there's the feather and fan pattern at the bottom. That's that wavy pattern. So that's one of my samples that I'm going to show you. This one is lattice work. So that was one short row sample because we're going to go over a lot of short rows today. And then here is also, this one's lattice work. This uses short rows in kind of a different way. So I use short rows to turn the corner at the bottom here. And I will go through that. And this one here, this is a more perfect union. It is designed to look like basically red, white, and blue bunting. So that one has a different type of short row up at the top, and we will go through that. And last but not least, this is my town square shawl, and this is from my new lace knitting book. And the top part of this is shaped with short rows. So I often like to hide the spine in my shawls, and I come up with various ways not to have a spine on my triangular shawls. And so you'll see short rows happening often just so that you have a nice unbroken piece of lace or fabric up at top. So those are some of the samples I'll be going over. And then just let me take another look here. Suggestions of how to manage a yarn over after pearl stitch. Absolutely. Um, I will put that on my list. And okay, so a yarn over after a pearl stitch. I will show you what I do. There are different ways to do it. I have my favorite, so we'll see if that works for you. Alrighty, so I am going to switch it over to my hands. And let's take a look here. So again, today I have my speech to text. So some of these things may be a little bit off. I tried to make sure that the knitting terms are spelled correctly, but you're going to probably see a few surprises. And then later on, YouTube will come through and go through and they close caption it, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody could understand what was happening during the live. Okay, so I have short rows both to shape the top of a crescent shawl, and then also this one is based on this little mini shawl here is based on my Beautiful Together shawl. So there are actual short rows within the lace patterning here. So I wrote this for Wrap and Turn in Beautiful Together. And we had a question last time about Wrap and Turn versus German short rows. So I'm going to show you how to do both. And I'm going to show you um, how to switch one for the other. And then also, I'm going to talk a little bit about how they've been used in my patterns. So I often use wrap and turn, but when I use wrap and turn, in general, it's when you don't have to actually work the wrap. So in a wrap and turn short row, there are two parts of it. One is setting it up, and then the second part is you're going to resolve the short row. So if I'm going to do a wrap and turn, so you'll see in my patterns, I will say something like knit 3 or knit to the 3 to 3 before the last turn. Okay, so let's say I've just come up to where I want to have a wrap and turn short row, and I'm on the right side here. And I do want to say most of my wrap and turn short rows are in garter stitch, or they're going to be hidden by garter stitch. Okay, So I'm going to wrap this next stitch here. But what I often do when I do any type of short row is I will put a marker in where I turn so that it's easier for me to remember where I turned, especially for wrap and turn short rows. When you turn in the middle of your knitting, the idea with a short row method like this is to close up the gap in between the stitch before you turn and the stitch after you turn. So you usually don't want a gap here. Sometimes I use that gap as a design element, and I will show you that a little bit later. So I've come up to my point here. I'm just going to mark where I turned because it's very easy to lose it. So I'm going to bring my yarn forward and then slip this next stitch purlwise. When I slip it purlwise, I'm keeping it oriented the same way that it has been before. And I'm just going to slip it back to my left needle and turn my work around here. So it's kind of like giving this little stitch over here a hug. So now I'm going to slip my marker and I'm going to start purling. Okay, so here you can see this is the turn right here. I like to cozy that up a little bit, so I'm just going to pull it a little bit tighter. So I know a lot of people say don't choke your short rows. I choke them. So, and of course, it's at the end. It is every knitter, you know, what you like to see and what works best for you. But I find that with my knitting style, I like to pull this a little bit tighter so these two stitches kind of cozy up there and close that gap. So that is my first short row. That is a wrap and turn short row. And it's basically the same on the other side. When I'm going to do a wrap and turn, I'm going to have the yarn in front and slip that stitch, yarn to back, and slip my stitch back on my left needle, turn around, and bring my yarn back. I did not mark this one, but when I'm doing a lot of short rows, if you were to take a look at like my whole line of short rows, I would have markers in between each one of them so that I would remember at a glance where I've turned, and it's incredibly helpful. Okay, so here is my stitch here. So here's why I like to mark them. If you take a look at this, these two stitches look like they're really close together. And this right here looks like where I've turned. But I didn't actually turn here. I turned here. And this is the gap that I'm trying to close up right there. So, but it looks like over here that this is the gap I want to close up. In reality, when I work across this area here, this won't look like a gap at all. And this is going to be the area that I have to pay more attention to. Okay, so that is wrap and turn. I don't generally have you resolve the wrap and turn short rows in my patterns. And that is because I usually use them in garter stitch. So if you take a look up at the top here, I'm just going to grab some of my samples. So up at the top, you can see right here, because I have a little light table, you can see where the short rows are, the wrap and turn short rows across here. So these were used as shaping, and I don't need to resolve the short row because it's in a garter stitch field, and that little pearl bumpy looking wrap just sort of disappears back into the fabric. So you can see, I'll hold it up really close. You can kind of see an extra pearl bump there. And that is the wrap. So it does not need to be resolved at all. It can be left just like it is. So I am just going to quickly show you in case you want to know how to resolve a wrap on the knit side. So here I am. I have my little pin here. Okay, so here is the wrap at the base. So if I were doing wrap and turn in stockinette fabric, I would take the wrap off of the base of the stitch and put it up onto my left needle. So you can see here, the wrap and turn is comprised of two pieces. One piece is the loop here, and that was what was wrapping the stitch. And then the second piece is the stitch. So you can tell which one you want on top, because if you take a look here at the stitch, you can see this unbroken column of stockinette. So that needs to go on top of that, and these two need to be worked together. So I'm going to knit two together, and that's going to hide my wrap behind a stitch. Okay, so that's important to remember. How that was resolved is important to remember, because now we're going to go over to a German short row, and you can see some of the similarities and differences. So I had a question about substituting German short rows for wrap and turn. So if you want to do that, think of the stitch that is wrapped in a wrap and turn is the stitch you're going to pull over the top of your needle in a German short row. So for instance, if it says knit 3 stitches, wrap and turn, so we're going to knit 3 stitches here. So this is the stitch that I would wrap. Instead of wrapping it to do a German short row, instead I'm going to knit that stitch and then turn. So this is the stitch I'm going to pull over the top for my German short row. I'm going to slip that stitch. Again, this is the stitch that would have been wrapped. And now I'm going to pull my yarn over the top, and I want to extend these two legs. So it looks like a double stitch. You can see on the back here, that's where those two stitches are going to intersect. So a German short row is basically the loop and the stitch in one. Okay, so that's your German short row. And it creates what looks like a double stitch, but it's going to be worked as one single stitch. So let me go across here, and I will do a German short row on the purl side. Okay, so on the purl side, same thing. If it said purl 3 wrap and turn, you're going to purl 4 and then turn your work. Okay, so we're on the knit side now. I'm going to bring my working yarn forward. That working yarn is always going to come forward for a German short row. And I'm going to slip that stitch. And now I'm going to take my working yarn and pull it over the top. So I pull more on the purl side than on the knit side. Wants to sit, that little twist there wants to sit more towards the knit side. And now I'm just going to continue knitting across. Okay, so when you come to your double stitch, you're just going to work it as one stitch. So here's that double stitch, and you're just going to work it as one stitch and keep on going. You can see here it fades into the background, and this makes it a really good option for any type of short row patterning, short rows inside patterning, because that single, the stitch that looks like a double stitch, it can be manipulated just like any other single stitch. So that makes it much easier to use within lace patterning. Okay, let me back out a little bit because the big thing that always used to make me nervous about German short rows is losing my double stitch off of the needles. That always used to like absolutely terrify me. So, okay, so what happens if you lose it? Okay, so I lost it. So what I want to do, I want to work this stitch and the loop. It's basically a loop and a stitch like a wrap and turn short row. So I'm going to work those together. So let's do that one more time. I am going to do another short row just for fun, just so I can drop it off. Okay, so here we go. And this time I'm not even going to do any type of short row method. I'm just going to come back here, and here's my German short row, and oops. Okay, so here is what is just like a wrap, and here is the stitch. So this is not unlike a plain wrap and turn short row because you have those two pieces still. So I'm just going to work it like it was my wrap and turn short row. So if it falls off, that's what you do. I also have a little tutorial on that, and I think it might be a little bit clearer on that as well. Okay, so that is one type of short row. And now let's take a look at something else I use. So in some of the tops of my crescent shawls, I have these holes, like in my More Perfect Union. This one has these holes across here, and those are created just by turning. So all I do is I just turn, and I don't wrap, and I don't do anything at all. So once those are created there, I enhance them by adding a yarn over here. And so what we're going to have, so I turned here without doing anything, but I'm just going to go back a little bit so it's easier to see. Okay, so I created a hole here. So this is what it would look like in the top of any of those shawls with the with that design element. So this is where it was turned for a short row. So when I come to it, I'm going to do a yarn over and then continue on. And those are done all the way across. So let me show you, because the short rows end in the middle of the piece, that means that you're going to have you're going to be a little bit off. So I wanted all of the yarn overs to look like they were on the same row. So you're going to see an instruction in one of the patterns where you're going to slip a yarn over and add a yarn over as well. So here I am at my yarn over where my short row was. And this one was not a wrap and turn. It was not German. All it was just turning. So I added a yarn over here to make it into a design element like this. So I have you slip the yarn over and add a second strand across the top. So I am going to just turn around here. So once you're going to have on one side, you're going to have one strand of yarn over, and on the other side, you'll have two strands. So when you get back to that point where you have the two-stranded yarn over, you're just going to work into the yarn over as usual. So if you are going to work 3 or 5 stitches into that yarn over, all you're going to do is just go right through the center of both of those strands and work on. So you have a nice big hole as a design element. So that is another way that yarn overs are used in some of my shawl patterns. Okay, so in the town square shawl, this one is a little bit different. The top is actually shaped with short rows, and they're just turned. So there's no wrapping, there's no German short row, there's no nothing. And then there's a twist in here to hide where the turn is. And so once you have turned, after you've shaped this entire middle triangle, you're just going to pick up, you're going actually to have all your stitches already to knit all the way around because they're short rows. So every time you're turning, when you go back and forth, you are leaving off another stitch. So at the end, you have all of your stitches still, and you're just going to be working down from there. So just as an aside, so these are Nupes right in this area here, and I'm going to show you how to do those later. You can see on my light panel where they are in here. These are 5-stitch Nupes, and they're like a little, it's Estonian for button, and it's just a little ornament to create surface interest. Okay. And I would like to call your attention to this lace motif here. You can see around the edge here. Do you see where there's a single strand in between each of these yarn overs? Only a single strand of yarn. But when you look down into this trellis section here, do you see that twist? So there's a twist in between each one of those yarn overs. And that means down here that there's a resting row. After you've worked a yarn over, you have a resting row. So up here where there's only a single strand, that is yarn overs on both sides. So you don't have a resting row. So that's how you can tell. Let me see. So Marianne, I think you're asking what the name, I think it might be the pink shawl you're talking about. This is the Town Square shawl, and that one is in my book, New Lace Knitting. And then I have Lattice Work, that's this one. So this is another way that short rows are used. Short rows can be hidden within the lace. So what I've done here to turn the corner and to create more material across here, I turned back and forth and did some short rows in this area right here where they're hidden by all of the yarn overs. So because the short rows create those little holes anyway, they're basically hidden just by virtue of where they're placed. So there's a short row here. You can see that yarn over is just a little tiny bit bigger. And there's a short row here. That yarn over is just a little bit bigger. So that's another way to use short rows in lace, is just to place them so that you can add the material without having to do any type of short row method at all. Just a turn in the middle of the lace in the right place. Okay, let's see, just checking to make sure. So I am pretty sure that the speech to text is going to misspell Nupes. So um, it's Nupps and Nupps. Noop. Yeah. I don't know why it can't speak Estonian. I mean, what? Alrighty. Um, let's take another look. This is just kind of interesting. This is what a stacked double yarn over looks like in between here with those extra twists like that. It's very simple. It's just stacked double yarn overs, and that's it. Okay, so I hopefully that has covered um, short rows. So I have to reposition myself here on my booster chair. Alrighty, I have a list of everything that I want to do. Okay, let's take a look at this chart. So this is a chart for an edging, and it's a knitted on edging, and I am not really going to go over that yet. We'll talk about bind offs later on, but this is a knitted on edging, and it's worked at a 90-degree angle to the body of the shawl, and it's how you it's how you can bind off. It's a really nice and stretchy way and really decorative and beautiful way to bind off a shawl or another piece of lace. Let's see. So Marianne said I could see that with a Vickle braid on each side. And I need to probably do braids at some point too, because a couple of my designs have braids in them. Okay, so I just want to talk a little bit about um, how you would place beads in here, and also how you can write into, you can increase and decrease by using only more yarn overs or fewer yarn overs. So basically, when you when you have a stable lace pattern, your numbers of increases and decreases are going to match. So in other words, your numbers of yarn overs are going to match the numbers of whatever type of decrease you have. So in order to just make this wave here, there's an extra decrease that goes along in the chart, and then to go back out, there's an extra increase. So that can be a little bit confusing, because if you take a look here, and it looks at the bottom, it looks like there's 5, 10, 15, 20. Looks like there are 24 stitches needed, but that is not necessarily the case. So one thing that often people find tricky is that it is not every single box is going to take one stitch. So let me get this a little bit closer here. Okay, so if you look at this symbol right here, this is a yarn over. That only takes that takes 0 existing stitches. So when you're counting, what you're going to do to count is to figure out how many stitches each of these symbols will take. So it's 1, 2, and that doesn't take anything. This takes 2 existing stitches, and that takes 2 existing stitches. So that's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. So there are 24 boxes, but it's only going to take 23 existing stitches. So that's often kind of confusing when you are looking at a row of knitting and A, you're trying to figure out how many stitches you need, and B, you're trying to possibly place some markers or figure out how to establish a pattern. Let me see if there are any questions. Okay, just checking. Alrighty. Then as we go up, you can see here, there's added an extra decrease right here. So the moral of this story is, when you are counting to see how many stitches you need for a row, count how many stitches each box takes. So when you look at a chart, basically when you're looking at a row like this, you're looking at what it's going to look like after you have finished knitting this entire row. So this isn't what it looks like beforehand. That's what it will look like when you're finished. So at the end, you will have 24 stitches, but at the beginning, you don't really know how many stitches you're going to need until you look at each individual stitch symbol and see how many stitches it takes. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about beads because there are beads up in this chart. So I tend to place beads where motifs come to a point. On this particular chart, they are placed on the wrong side, but you can also place them on the right side, and I'll show you how to do that. So let me grab some beads here. Okay, so I have some size 60 beads. I like to use 60s. They have, I like the size of them. They just stand out a little bit more. And these are Japanese seed beads. So they have a nice uniform hole in them. And if you can stick your crochet hook through one of them in the package, you can probably stick your crochet hook through almost all of them. There might be one that you can't. So this right here is a steel crochet hook, and I use it to place beads. It has a really tiny hook on the end, but it's very handy for placing beads. So I can get quite a few on my shank here. Okay, so the way that steel crochet hooks are, this one is a size number 8 steel hook. However, this is a clover number 8. So if you purchase another number 8, it may not have the same hook size on it because the number 8 refers to how large the shank is. So that can be a little bit frustrating if you can't hold it and stick your crochet hook through beads. But there are some, let's see. So question, what brand of seed beads do I have? So these are dynamites. These are from Fire Mountain Gems, and they are definitely not the highest, like the most expensive, most perfectly machined beads. But for this type of use, they're perfect. So if you take a look at them, they're slightly different sizes. So a lot of those very precisely milled Japanese seed beads are used for bead weaving. So they need to be exactly the same size. But for our purposes, you don't have to break the bank. You can go ahead and get something like this. So I mentioned this before, but a size 60 is supposed to be 6 beads per inch. So when you string them, it's 6 beads per inch. So, okay, so now let's take a look at this. I'm just going to make a little point in my fabric so that I can place a bead on it. Okay, so say I don't want to place my bead on the back, and this is going to be the stitch that I want to place it on the back. So here I just did this centered double decrease, and you can see that bead that's going to be placed there on the back side. But I don't want to pay attention to it on the back side, so I've decided I want to place it on the front side instead. So what I'm going to do is do that actual stitch and then place a bead on it. So I'm just going to grab my bead here, and it's easier for me to work on it when it's on my left needle. So I've slipped the stitch back that I just did, and I'm going to grab the loop. Let me move this aside so it's easier to see. Okay, I'm going to grab the loop and then push my bead over the loop and take it off my left needle, push it down, then it's going to go back on my left needle, and I'm just going to slip that stitch back over here. So that's in case I want to do it on the right side instead of the wrong side. And now I can just continue. And now if I'm going to knit that next row, I'm just going to ignore this little bead symbol here and just purl across there. So if I want to do it on the wrong side, it's going to be a little bit different. If I'm on the wrong side, I'm going to place the bead first, and then I'm going to work the stitch afterwards. Okay, just going to grab another bead here and basically do the same thing, push it down over the stitch, pull the stitch off my needle, and then replace. And now after that, I'm going to purl my stitch. So these beads are placed over both legs of the stitch. They are not pre-strung. A pre-strung bead will only have one thickness of yarn through it, and these have 2 thicknesses of yarn through. I like to use this type of bead placement in lace because lace is looser and the yarn is finer and more delicate. And this is not going to move around. So you're going to be able to see them on both sides perfectly. Okay, so let's get a little farther. I'm going to show you one of my favorite things, which is super floss. Let's get past this area here. Super floss is what I use to travel with when I have beads and I want to take my knitting with me and I don't want to spill beads all over the place. So it comes in a little package, and I have the package around here. There we go. This is what the package looks like. It's Oral-B Super Floss. And it has that nice stiff end, and then it has a fuzzy little area here, and then it has a long piece of floss. And I like to stick my one bead at the bottom here and tie it on. And then I can string my beads on the rest of it, and I can take them with me wherever I want to go. So this is basically the same type of thing as with the crochet hook. So to place, you're going to put the super floss through your stitch here, bend it in half, and now you're going to move a bead up. So it's pretty handy. This little fluffy area here is pretty handy for a bead staging area. And you're just going to put it over both thicknesses. Pull the stitch off. Pull that bead down and replace the stitch up on your needle. And then you can work that stitch. Looks exactly the same as using a crochet hook. There are plenty of other things you can do too. I know some people who use sewing thread and all sorts of other types, little pieces of wire, um, like dental floss threaders, dental floss. There's so many ways, but I love super floss because one of these pieces lasts forever and ever, and you can just carry it with you anywhere you want to go. It's like super handy. So, okay. So that was another question that I had was about beads. So hopefully that is good. Okay. Let's go on to Nupes. I'm going to show you how to do a Nupe. And I wanted to talk a little bit about beads and Nupes at the same time because a lot of people really hate doing Nupes and they use beads instead. So here's what I want you to think about when you're switching back and forth. So also, this is the wrap and turn that I had on my wrong side, and since I'm going to go across here, I'll just show you on this side what the wrap looks like. So you can see it right here in the middle of your stockinette column. So that little purl stitch needs to be removed. Let me get this back on. Okay. So same thing was happening here. Okay. So I'm going to take the wrap off because I don't want it to show. Here's my wrap. Here's my stitch. I want my stitch to be positioned. Well, let me put that back. I want my stitch to be positioned so that it's in front on the other side and you can't see the wrap. And this is just on stockinette. So I'm kind of just doing this as an aside because I don't usually write it into my patterns where you have to work the wrap. So here's my little loop right here. I've taken it off from around the stitch. I have to put my needle through this stitch first so it can look like it's on top of that loop on the other side. So that means I need to reposition it. So I'm going to slip it knitwise and then slip it back. Now I'm going to put my little wrap back onto my left needle and I'm going to purl those two together through the back loop. And that's going to take care of your wrap. So that was just a little bit of an aside because I don't usually do those in my patterns. So you're not going to come across having to do that. So I have a little question. What weight yarn would we need for heavier decorative beads and metallics? So I wouldn't suggest using metal beads. Metallic glass like this is okay. So metal beads can cut any weight of yarn. So you generally can't find ones that are like smooth enough, or you have to be pretty careful. So I've used I've used heavier beads on like a sport or DK weight, and they worked really well. So the big thing that you have to be careful about is the hole size. Because seed beads were designed for several strands of beading thread to go through, the hole has a larger circumference. So on other like more decorative types of beads, you're going to usually find a much smaller hole. So you'll definitely need to get to make friends with super floss if you use those. So another thing to be wary of is crystals. I have heard of people using crystals and it can cut the yarn. So just be careful. I know other people who've used them and had no problems. So, and then let's see. Oh, yes, Claire, you made a really good point. You said I love floss, and so floss. Last time I was live, I was showing you also how to put in a lifeline with dental floss. When you use floss, don't get the waxed stuff. So waxed floss can actually melt into your knitting if you leave it in a hot car or something like that. So just be careful. Okay, so let's go on to Nupes. Alrighty. So I have some 5-stitch and some 7-stitch Nupes in my pattern. So I'll just show you a 5-stitch one. So I knit continental, so I think it's going to be helpful if I show you also how to do this English style. Because I knit continental, it tends to be a little bit looser. So into one stitch, I'm going to do a 5-stitch loop. So into one stitch, I'm going to knit one, yarn over, knit one, yarn over, and knit one. So you can see I'm kind of pulling this apart a little bit so that it's looser. And that is because I'm going to purl these all together on the other side. So a lot of people really, really despise Nupes, and instead of doing a Nupe, they like to place a bead. And that is completely fine because this is not actually an increase on the next row. These are all going to get purled together. So that is completely fine. Okay, so I'm just going to show you what that would look like to purl them together on the other side. So here are the 5 stitches, and I'm just going to stick my needle in there and purl those together. And I'll show you what a nupe looks like. Nupps. That's hilarious. Nupes. Okay, that is what it looks like right here. It's not a bauble. It's a particular different kind of ornament. So you can do a 7 stitch one as well. Okay, let me show you what that would look like if I were knitting it English style. It looks a little bit different, and it's actually more difficult to keep it loose if you are an English style knitter. So I think you have to put a little bit more effort into just keeping it really loosened up. Okay, and I think it's all because of the yarn overs. So I'm going to knit one and bring my yarn forward and knit one. I'm terrible English style knitter, so please forgive me. The yarn overs tend to tighten up much more when you're an English style knitter, from my experience. So you need to spend a little bit extra time in there just keeping them nice and loose. But nice and loose they can be. And even though that looks sloppy, when you're going back the other way, it's going to look much neater and nicer. Okay, so we were talking before about a yarn over um, after a purl. Okay, so I think you might mean a yarn over before a purl, but um, but I don't know. Possibly. Okay, let's try this. So I'm just going to do knit two together, and I'm going to purl this beaded stitch here. So I have a problem with yarn overs before purls because they tend to get larger. So I leave the yarn over out and I put a marker in there where my yarn over is going to be and purl the next stitch. And then I have yarn over and an SSK on the other side. So here's where my yarn over is going to be. And I don't worry about pulling this very tight across here. It's actually totally fine that that's sort of loose because when I come back, that will match my other yarn over better. So I'm just going to turn it over and show you going back the other way. Okay, so once I come to that part here where my marker is, I'm going to take my marker off and I'm going to pick up that bar in between the stitches and work it like it's in a yarn over. And here we are at the Nupe, and I promised I would try this English style. They're, I have to admit, much easier to do continental style, but there you go. There's another Nupe. Okay, so here is the yarn over before the purl and then the yarn over after the purl. And I think they come out pretty close in size. So hopefully, hang on, could you show yarn over as first? Yes, absolutely. So Claire asked for yarn over as first stitch of the row. I will do that. And that also plays very well into something else I'm going to show you, which is how to keep edges loose. So I have two things to show you here. Stripes, how to keep your edge loose with your stripe, and then just plain old keeping the edges loose. Okay, I'm just going to get to the end here, and then I will show you a yarn over at the beginning of the row. So I often use yarn overs at the beginning of a row to shape a triangle. And like in my mystery shawl, which is behind me back here, the inner triangle was shaped using yarn overs. So there are yarn overs at the beginning of each row as a way to shape. Okay. So first I'm going to show you here continental style. So I'm just going to bring my needle up under my yarn right here to do a yarn over. So I'm going to bring it up under here, and I always put my finger on here. It kind of helps me just keep it from slipping off. And then I'm going to start knitting. And now I have a yarn over right at the beginning of the row. If I were doing it with holding the yarn in my right hand, I would basically do the same thing. So say I have my yarn held in my right hand here, my needle would still come up under the yarn there, and I would just stick my finger on there to keep it sort of on the needle and just wrap. Okay, sorry about that. I'll just wrap and I had it a little bit too tight. Okay. You have to forgive me. I'm having English knitting technical difficulties. So just hold it like this. And then I'm going to stick my needle in there. I'm going to hold it with my thumb. So I think that's going to help me. And I'm going to wrap here and just make that stitch. And that's a yarn over at the beginning of the row. So that can be used as an increase, and it can also be used to keep your edges nice and loose. Okay, so if you are increasing a lot along the side, sometimes your edges can get too tight. And that's particularly the case if you're working on stripes. So one way to get around that is to put a little extra yarn over at the beginning of the row. And then when you go back the other way, you're just going to drop it. So just going to pretend I worked all the way across. And I'm just coming back here to my yarn over that I stuck in here at the beginning of the row. And I'm just going to work those 3 edge stitches and drop the yarn over off of my needle. And that's going to give you a lot more stretch on the side if you need it. Okay. So on this type of thing, when it's straight like that, you're really not going to need um, more stretch. But sometimes you'll need it if you're using stripes. So I had a question about carrying yarn up the side for stripes. And here is what I do just if I have 2-row garter stripes. I'm just going to bring my yarn up behind my new yarn here and then just start working. So Marianne asked, will that be the same at the end of the row? I never put in yarn overs at the end of the row, and I have never seen them in a pattern. So that would be incredibly difficult to do. I always put one at the beginning, and then when you turn over, you're going to put one at the beginning on the way back. So each row starts with a yarn over, and it ends with a knit or purl or whatever. But it's just the row itself is going to start with it. So hopefully you haven't come across one at the end of the row. So this is what I've been doing. I just bring my yarn up to knit. So I just wanted to show you what I do if I am carrying my yarn up the side and there's more, like if there's three, probably like 4 rows of stripe instead of just 2. So I like to twist it around and bring it up. So there are ways, I mean, there are other ways to do this, but I like the twisty method like this. And I think it also helps not get it too tight. So I've just twisted it around here, you can see, and now I'm going to let this just hang and just start working again with my gray here. And my miniature schnauzer is barking downstairs. She sounds quite irate. So hopefully you didn't hear her. Okay. So now when I come back the other way, and we'll show you what that looks like to change over. Okay. So now we're back here. So now I'm going to take my next yarn here, and you can see it was wrapped together, and I'm just going to bring it up behind and start in. So with stripes like this that are more than 2 rows, I often will put a yarn over in, like we were talking about, to keep that edge nice and loose. So I've just added a yarn over there, and I'm just going to start working across. So when I come back here, I'm going to drop this so it's nice and loose. Okie dokie. So Claire asked if it's twisted once. It is actually twisted. I twisted it twice around. If I'm just doing groups of 2 stitches, all I do is just bring the next yarn up behind. So yeah. Okay, so I had a couple of other questions people asked. Okay, so I had a question before about how to keep your hands like nice enough so that they don't kind of catch onto your like lace weight yarn. And I live in a really super dry area. So here's what I do to keep my hands from just completely demolishing my yarn. So I get calluses and hangnails, and I use an emery board just to like file them off basically. And that actually works better than any type of clipper because a clipper leaves those like little dry edges on there. So just like on the actual skin, I will just like kind of file it down so it's smooth and soft. And then you can use just like a buffing pad. These are kind of spongy, and it's like a really fine, just buffing, nail buffing tool. And it works really well on your skin. And I've never filed my fingerprints off, so it's working okay. And then I like cuticle oil. Um, this is just vitamin E cuticle oil. That is really helpful as well. So that works really well. And um, so this is a great lotion bar if you like such things. This is lavender and rosemary, and it's beeswax and other essential oils and almond oil, and it's really nice for your hands. And the last thing I do after I've been pulling weeds or something like that, I sometimes get little cuts and stuff. So this stuff is really good. It paints on over like any little tiny areas that you might have like a little tiny cut or scratch or something like that, so that you don't get blood on your yarn. I know that sounds kind of nasty, but I've done it. So this stuff is great. So it covers it right up and it seals your cut, and you can knit within like 2 minutes. It's awesome, wonderful stuff. So those are a few things that I do. And then I had a couple of questions. Susan says I knit Eastern or Russian style, so I always knit through the back loop and purl. Okay, what kind of changes? So so what Susan is talking about is Western patterns assume that your stitches are going to be mounted with the right leg in front and the left leg in back. So Eastern combined knitters purl so that so let me just back out here so I can show everybody what it looks like, what the purl looks like. And I have actually, I used to knit that way. And when I started designing lace and knitting and designing lace, I actually changed my knitting style because it was just a pain. And I'm not suggesting you do that too. But okay, so here's what Susan's talking about. So in a Western purl, the yarn comes over the top of the needle, and when you purl, the stitch is mounted with the right leg in front and the left leg in back. In an Eastern purl, the needle comes over the yarn, and the stitch is mounted with the right leg in back and the left leg in front. So that poses a few problems for directional stitches. Okay, so here's the issue. As we're going along, if you follow what people would say for a knit two together, and your stitches have the right leg in back and the left leg in front, you're going to end up with something. Actually, what you probably end up with is an SSK. It would be reversed. So my suggestion, um, until you get used to all of the different ones. I mean, so many. There's so many stitches to go through. Okay, so to do an SSK, you would basically knit two together through the back loop. So that would be knitting two together through the back loop like that. To do a knit two together, you would need to slip as if to purl, slip as if to purl, replace the two on your needle, and knit two together. So each time you have a directional stitch, you're going to need to think about it. Um, let's see. I think the best thing to do, what I did when I knit with a combined purl, is every time I came to a directional stitch, I just reoriented my stitches with the right leg in front and the left leg in back so I could follow the instructions of the stitch the way that it was written. And sometimes I would end up repositioning, but then after a while, I got used to which stitches needed to be repositioned and which didn't. So one of the things I'm doing when I'm updating my patterns is to go through and make sure that in all of my stitch descriptions, it says which way the stitch leans. So, so that people who are combined knitters can take a look at it and be able to tell whether or not it's what was intended. I hope that helps. There are a lot of directional stitches. Lace is mostly made of directional stitches, so at first it can be a little bit of a lot to chew and swallow, but after a while you should get kind of more used to it, I think. And let me see. Questions. Ooh, olive oil sounds nice. Olive oil and salt, that sounds really nice. Like a rub for your hands. That sounds great. I'll have to try that. And then, okay, okay, great. So I don't think I had any more questions there. I had to make sure that um, there was one more thing I wanted to talk about, and that is in a lot of patterns, you're going to see that the top is just plain, and then after that, you're going to be establishing a pattern. So what I like to do, like when I have a chart like this, is I will go through and mark out all the repeats all the way across. So for instance, if I'm starting like my little bit of love here. So right here, when I was starting this lace part there, super easy to get lost in this area without any markers. So I would just go take a look at the chart, and wherever there's a repeat line, I'm just going to go all the way across and stick in markers. So just all the way across by like how many stitches per repeat. And then I can tell like pretty quickly at a glance if my stitches are off or if my repeat is off or something like that, and I can go back and fix it before I start knitting and get lost in the middle of it. And let's see, any other questions here? Okay, so one thing you need to worry about, and well, not really worry about, but just keep a watch out. If you're using stitch markers and you come to a double decrease next to a repeat line, the stitch marker is going to move. So as long as you are able to read your knitting, you won't have a problem with that. But we're sort of, I've gone over again. Sorry, so much to talk about. But next time I will show you in the middle of a lace chart what I'm talking about, and we'll talk a little bit about stitch markers moving and also how to knit around your stitch markers. So that's also something I did a tiny tutorial on. So if you want to take a look at that now, it's useful information and it's right in the playlist. So let me just transition over. So thank you all so much for putting up with me for like an hour and a half. I didn't realize I'd gone over like that. So I try to make each one of these about an hour, but there's so much to talk about, and you have questions, and it's a topic that I love to go on and on about. So yeah, so here we are, and I really appreciate that you stuck with me. So I'm just going to blather a little tiny bit and make sure that nobody has any more questions. Um, there's going to be another live next Thursday. So if you have questions or anything like that, um, like just write to me and I'll put them on my list to go over. So let me see. Okay, so Marianne asked, is a double yarn over always counted as one? Um, it's not. So a double yarn over is one hole, but it's actually two stitches. And that varies because you can have a double yarn over and it's two stitches after you've done it. Like when you're on the right side, you have the double yarn over. And then when you go on to the wrong side, you're going to usually work two stitches into your double yarn over, but you can actually work more stitches into it than just two. So depending on how many stitches you end up working into that bigger hole that the double yarn over creates, that is going to give you your final stitch count. So that's one of the ways that I like to increase a lot is by having larger yarn overs like that and working more stitches into them. And it gives kind of a more organic type of increase. So I guess the answer is yes and no. Um, Double yarn over generally, I would say is a baseline of two stitches. And then after the return row, when you're knitting into it, you can actually increase. So I you can work, 5, 6, 7 stitches into it. So let me see any other questions. Okay. Alrighty. So, and then when Marianne is counting it on the reverse side, correct. So it all depends on the way it's used. Generally, for a double yarn over on the front side, you'll have those two stitches. So it'll show like two yarn over symbols, and you would count it as at the end of that row, you would count it as two stitches on your needle. So then, but it may increase on the reverse side. So yeah. And then let's see. Oh, thank you. Thank you all. I'm so glad that this is helpful, and I appreciate you all so much and your lovely comments. I truly, truly do. Um, and you all have been so good to me. So I hope that this will make your lace knitting lives easier, better, you know, I hope I answer questions and just make things simpler and calmer and more enjoyable. So, thank you all so much. I just think you all are the greatest and I appreciate you so much. And I hope that I will see you again next Thursday. Don't forget just ask me, like you can write to me, write me questions or whatever, and I will answer them all. Oh, and I forgot to say, some of you wrote to me and said you missed my sale, and I totally get that because there is so much information coming at us all the time, all at once. So easy to miss stuff. So I did put my sale back up. So you can use coupon code ENCORE, ENCORE, to get 30% off my self-published patterns on Ravelry and designsbyromi.com through July 9th. So that's the Sunday through Pacific Daylight Time. So thank you all so much. And just checking to make sure that I got everybody. Okay, thank you. I will see you next week. Don't forget to write me any of your questions. And we're hanging out on Ravelry and Facebook. So I hope to see you there and on Instagram and, all over the place. So take care, everybody. Bye bye.